Hi there, this is Heather of Shutterbug 101. Today we'll be going over the layout of the Panasonic GH5 and GH5s and see some video examples from the GH5s and the 20mm 1.7 lens. Let's get started. The Panasonic GH5 and GH5s are Micro Four Thirds mirrorless cameras that are built to get you amazing videos. Although both have close to the exact same body layout, they do have their differences in features. The GH5 camera has a 20 megapixel sensor, ISO sensitivity that goes up to 25,600, and has in-body stabilization, making this camera also a great option for photography as well. The GH5s has a 10 megapixel sensor, which benefits videos taken in low light, has an ISO sensitivity that goes up to 51,200, but does lack stabilization in the body, so a gimbal may be an option to look into. Both cameras have 225 focus points, a fully articulating touch LCD screen, a continuous drive of 12 frames per second for photography, a whole lot of video quality and frame options, a dual SD card slot, UHS 2 compatible, a headphone port, a microphone port, and are environmentally sealed. Now let's go over the buttons, doors, and menus to help you navigate these cameras a little bit easier. So, I decided to do things a little bit differently than normal, considering that this is mainly a video camera. That's kind of what it's targetedly made for, although it can do pictures, both the GH5 and the GH5s. So I wanted to show you guys more of the video capability than the picture taking capability of this camera, because that's really what it's going to be purchased for. So if you're really into video and you're really wanting to get into it, this is definitely one of the best compact video cameras that they have. And of course, depending on more of your target video, you may want something with stabilization, or maybe you want something more targeted for low light. It's really going to kind of be up to you and what you think that you're going to need more out of each model. But the camera itself is going to be almost identical to each other when it comes to GH5 versus GH5s. The layout is going to be darn near the same, so I wouldn't worry too much about whether or not you have the GH5 or the GH5s here when I'm going over it. The menus are going to be the same. It's going to be almost identical with the button layout. But if you do have any questions, if you do find something different, let me know in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer any questions there. This camera, of course, does not come with a kit lens. It's a body only. And I decided to grab the 20mm 1.7. Now, one thing I will warn you guys about, this lens is a fantastic lens, but unfortunately it does not continually autofocus, which I think is a real bummer. So when I was taking those videos, I did have a very difficult time when I was moving with the camera trying to stick to my focus. It had to be manual focus only, or kind of pinpoint autofocus. So something to definitely know about this lens with this camera. We'll go ahead and we'll start going over the front here. So as you can see, we have a pretty simplified front. We'll only have two buttons. This button here, of course, is going to be the lens release. So you're going to click and hold, and you are going to turn and lift. There's our beautiful sensor. You'll see the red dot on the lens. You'll line it up with the red dot on the camera. Turn and click, and it is locked on there now. It ain't going nowhere until you hit that button again. We do have a button up here, which is going to be our preview button. This is a function button, so you can make this button do whatever you would like. If you want it to be something for autofocus, something for ISO or aperture, whatever you want it to be, you can actually program this button with several others on the camera, which I'll point this out. We do have a flash sync port here underneath this screw tab, so it's something to keep in mind that this also has as well. It being a 10 megapixel camera, this thing is fantastic in low light. And at the beginning of the video of kind of my little short film of Heather starting her morning, thank you, Heather, for that, just a little shout out. I wanted to start it off, with her having the lights off. I told her, I said, don't do anything this morning, just let me film you getting ready. And the lights were off, and I'm like, let's see how this does. And it really was able to still capture a lot of detail even with the lights off. So I thought that was really, really cool. Going to the side of the camera here, we do have a spot for a remote control for long exposure photography. So if you do want to do any Milky Way shots, long exposure stuff, you do have that availability there. And then in this slot here, if you just slide, it'll pop right open. We do have a 2-card slot that is actually on the door here, as you can see, is SDXC UHS-2 compatible for both slots. And it does show you the direction to put the cards in there. On this side of the camera here, you can see we have our microphone port where it says mic, we have our headphone port where you see the little headphone symbol, and we do under this door here have an HDMI port, which is going to be a full HDMI, which is really neat. So those will be really easy to find. And then your USB-C cable port, which is going to be for transferring images, transferring video to your computer in a nice, quick, efficient way. On the bottom of the camera here, you can see that we have our door here for our battery, which is going to pop right open. We hit the switch here, battery is going to pop on out. And of course, as you can see, it only pretty much goes in one way. Contacts down, flat side against the flat side, and then you just switch that switch and it's locked in there. Going to the top of the camera here, you can see that we've got a lot going on. All right, so this dial here is going to be our drive dial. This is going to be controlling what the camera does when we're taking pictures specifically. So the single square is going to be for one photo. The multiple squares is our continuous drive. That's the 12 frames per second. We have our 4K burst option, which is going to be 30 frames per second on this camera when it comes to the burst. We have our post-focus mode, which is going to allow us to take a picture and then choose the focus point after the fact, which is really neat. And we have kind of like our time-lapse or stop motion or timer modes here. We do have a hot shoe attachment here for flash, so if we hit this button down, slide it across, those will be the contacts for the hot shoe. You can also use this as a cold shoe for like a shotgun mic or something like that, which is really nice. We have our on and off switch here, which of course the green light will show if you are getting power, so something to know there. Just to kind of start us out in a really basic spot, I am surprised that this camera has an intelligent auto mode, just has an automatic mode at all. But it does. Of course, this is going to specifically be for pictures, but what this intelligent auto mode does is if you have the camera pointed at a person, it'll kick into portrait mode. If you have it really close to a subject, it'll kick into macro mode, that sort of thing. So it's going to do a lot of the thinking for you, but if you're a bigger video person than you are a photo person and you just want to get a quick, good shot in the middle of your shoot, then you can just use the intelligent auto mode and be all set. Then you have your P mode for your program. If you do want to learn more about these manual modes, they are in my photography basics playlist, now you know. But I'm just going to kind of cover these in general here. But if you'd like to learn more about them, go and check those videos out. The P mode is going to be basically your first step out of automatic mode. Now, I can't imagine you guys using these very much, at least for photography. You can use the P, the A, the S, the M mode for video, but you can also change to one of these in the video mode itself, so something to keep in mind. But the P mode being your first step off of auto, it's going to allow you to change your shutter speed and aperture to a point that it recommends. It'll also allow you to change your focusing, where it focuses, how it focuses, your metering modes, all of those things, without being stuck into what the camera wants it to do. The A mode is primarily going to allow you to change your aperture to whatever you would like, while it determines the shutter speed. The shutter speed mode, the S, is going to allow you to change your shutter speed to anything you would like while the camera figures out the aperture for you. And then of course you have full-on manual mode, which is going to allow you to choose everything and anything. Here we have our movie mode, which will give you do not have to be in the movie mode in order to do video, but the menu is slightly different for this mode in comparison to being, say, in your aperture mode, which is actually what I was shooting in this morning, just because I found that more native to myself. And set my settings accordingly. But when you're in A mode, you do get a slightly different menu here. So if you guys do have any questions specifically about the movie menu, let me know. There are only a couple differences, so that's why I'm going to be in the P mode when going over the menu, just to get generally a lot of it, what's going on. Because when you're in the movie mode, you do actually get rid of a lot of the picture taking menu items available. So I want to cover the majority of it, but I don't want to spend twice long on this video just to cover both. So if you do have a very specific question, let me know if you're specifically in the movie mode. You have your C1, C2, and C3 modes. Those are going to be your custom modes. So for example, if you want to, if you're shooting video in a very specific setting, like you want your aperture to be wide open, or maybe you need to shoot at a certain speed and that sort of thing, or say you're using this for studio photography and you found your perfect settings with your studio lighting, you can save it to one of these custom settings. That way, if you leave the situation, you're trying something else in a different lighting, then when you come back and you want to take off where you started, all you have to do is dial into one of these. So it's kind of a nice little save point for you. And then the last thing on this dial here is going to be kind of your painter's palette, your creative mode. So it's going to give you different filters, which might give you some really interesting effects on your pictures or video. So you have like different monochrome options. There's like high dynamic, cross process, high key, low key. One of my favorites to kind of play with is the 1-point color. So it allows you to pick one specific color out of your environment, and everything else is black and white. So if you wanted to do something kind of creative where you only saw one color throughout your short film or something like that, like red or yellow, then you could absolutely do that in camera, which might be something fun to play with and help you kind of bridge outside that creative box that you're in. For the rest of the video, I'm going to go ahead and continue in the P mode, just so you guys are aware and can follow along. We do have our shutter button here. Now this is going to be pretty flush to the camera. They didn't want to make this guy obvious like you would see on other cameras, where it's like, hey, this is the shutter button, this is what you're going to use to take pictures. Mainly because they wanted to make the red button nice, big, and easy to find, because again, this camera was more dedicated toward the video side. So if you're taking pictures, you use this button up here. We have our adjustment knob here and here in order to change aperture, shutter speed, or even ISO. We have our white balance control, which is going to change our temperature from warm to cool. We have our ISO, which is that image sensitivity to light, which again, this camera specifically goes up to like 51,000, which is pretty insane. Not saying you would ever use that, but hey, it has that ability to. We have our exposure compensation, which is going to allow us to make our scene a little bit brighter or darker without changing any major settings here. We have our function 1 button, which again is programmable. And then we have our big red record button. You're going to push once to start recording, push again to stop recording. And as for the GH5s, these guys do not have that picky 29-minute limit that every other camera has, except for a few select recent Sony models. But a lot of cameras unfortunately have a 29-minute limit, so if you're specifically looking for something that is going to give you a long recording time, these cameras are an excellent choice. When it comes to the back of the camera here, we have our articulating touchscreen, which is really neat. It allows us to kind of pick our focus point wherever we would like to be. We have our playback button, which will allow us to look back on pictures or videos that we've already done. I don't have a card in here presently, but this is how you would get there. And then to go through the pictures, you would either hit the right or the left directional pad, or you can use this wheel here as well to kind of scroll through them as well. You have your function 5 button, which on the shooting mode is the LVF live viewfinder control. So if we hit this once, it's going to go right to the viewfinder. As you saw that lit up, hit it again, it's going to go straight to the screen. This sensor does not work, and you hit it one more time, and that's going to be our automatic mode. So if our face goes in front of this sensor, it's going to turn that viewfinder on, our face goes away, then the screen comes on. So it really just depends on what you think you're solely going to use. If you're putting this guy on a gimbal, you probably want to turn the auto viewfinder off, because if it does somewhat get a shadow or something like that, it can trip out your screen and trip you up as well. Here we have our autofocus modes here. So the way our autofocus modes work is it's how the camera autofocuses. So we have AFS, which is going to be autofocus single. This is where it's going to focus and lock on to a single subject where it's not moving. You have AFC, which is really where you want your settings to be at for video, especially if you're moving around. That way it continually searches for any movement, or if you're going past a subject and you want a new focus point, it'll move that focus point accordingly with you. So again, dedicated to movement, but as you can see here, when I switch this for this specific lens, it doesn't like to be on AFC. It likes to be on AFS, so it's something to keep in mind. AFF is autofocus flexible. This is where you're giving the camera the option to choose in between AFS and AFC, and it'll switch accordingly. But honestly, if you know you're going to be moving, or if you know you're going to be stationary, I would switch those accordingly. And then we have MF, which is full manual focus. And what's cool on the manual focus is if you're manually focusing with the dial here, what will happen, so do you see how on the edge of the lens cap that the blue pixels start to pop up as I kind of move the focus back and forth? That's showing that that's what's in focus. In person, you can see it much easier, but just so you guys know about the manual focus pixel peaking ability for that guy. We do have a joystick here, so if we do want to move our direct focus without having to use the touch screen, you can easily use the joystick there. You can change your display with the display button. So what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to change the display, so you can either get a very plain view. You can get this view here where you actually get a level to make sure that you are nice and straight, which I absolutely love. That was with the information. Then you just have the level. Then you just have information, no picture. This is plain black. And then we have this information here, which honestly I prefer this layout for my kind of like everyday shooting, because it'll tell you how much room you have on your card. It'll tell you like what your general settings are, and tell you what your battery power is, you know, all of these different things right in the window here. We have our function 2 button, which again, function buttons are reassignable, but in your shooting mode, it is going to be your quick menu. So if we hit this button here, we're able to change everything on the top and bottom of the camera, which is really cool. So the first one here is going to kind of determine how the colors are put out in the camera. So I would personally leave it on standard, but there's also vivid, natural, monotone, scenery. You can also customize how you want those colors to come out in your video or pictures. We have video quality, which I just shot at 1080 at 60 frames because at the moment I need to update my computer in order to handle the 4K. So it can handle the 4K. It can handle the 4K, it just tends to get a little patchy. So for the ease of editing, I just shot at the 60 frames. It gives me a little bit more options when it comes to slowing it down, speeding it up, and still being able to get a good quality out of it. You have your ratio size when it comes to your pictures. 4:3 and 3:2 tend to be the more common sizes. 16:9 is going to be more of a wide size. We have your picture quality here, so I always like to shoot in RAW if I'm taking pictures. The stills at the end of the pancake being eaten piece by piece, those were all raw images that were kind of thrown in there. So that is the picture quality there if you did want to see that. You can also just shoot in JPEG or RAW and JPEG. We have our metering here where it's taking the light from. The first option here is going to be where it's considering the entire area and finding a balance. You have the middle one here, which is your center metering, which is going to, of course, be whatever's directly in the center, like my camera's in the center of your screen. And then we have spot metering, which is going to consider if I wanted the camera over here and I wanted it to spot meter for this side rather than the center. We have our aperture and our shutter speed currently set here. That's what those two numbers are here. We have our exposure, which you can also change by the top of the camera, the brightness and darkness. You have your ISO, which again is changeable by the top of the camera, along with the white balance. So you don't necessarily need to go into the quick menu for those. And then, of course, real quick, if you wanted to get out of your quick menu or your regular menu, you're getting stuck, you're just like, I just want to get back to shooting, you can hold your shutter button halfway down and it'll get you right back into shooting mode. It's kind of your universal escape button. We do have our function 3 button, which is going to be a dedicated moving your window around. So there you go. We have our function 4 button, which at the moment looks like it's just bringing up the level or taking it away. This is all going to be also going to be your back button or your trash can button when it comes to looking at your pictures if you want to throw any of those away. Now we're going to go ahead and dive into the menu. So going over the menu today, we do have a few different tabs to go over, and some of these being that they were either in your quick menu or whether or not I think that you're going to use them at all when it comes to viewers to actually using some of these settings. I may skip over a couple things. If you do have any questions, if I don't go over something in enough detail, please let me know in the comments below and I will be sure to have a conversation with you about it, answer any questions that you may have, or clarify further. So just so you guys know on that. But the different tabs here, this is going to be your recording tab, this is going to be your motion picture tab, your custom settings tab, your regular setup tab, your My menu, and our playback menu here. So starting up at the top, and then of course coming over here, you can see how many pages each tab has. So the recording tab has 5 pages to go over. So the top here is going to be your aspect ratio, that was in your quick menu. The quality, picture size is going to be in regards to JPEG. If you have it on a JPEG, that's why it's grayed out, because I have it in RAW. So quality, again, you can change that in your quick menu. AFS, AFF, that's going to be that bar, or that's this switch right here. Your autofocus custom settings, photo style. Again, in your quick menu, you have your filter settings. So if you did want if you did want to set any filter effects, you could do that through the menu as well. We have your color space, which I would just keep sRGB. We have your metering mode, also changeable from the quick menu. Highlighting your shadows, the eye dynamic, the eye resolution, those are all going to be kind of assisting you when it comes to letting the camera decide on certain things. I personally like to keep them off because I like to have a little bit more control over my pictures and videos, but this is all, this is all going to be your decision and preference. Changing your flash settings, red eye removal, depending if you are, taking pictures. You have your ISO sensitivity. Now this is specifically for photo, as you can see, and I like to set the limit here. Personally, I wanted to see what it would do up to 12,800. I didn't want it to have to go up all the way to its 51,000 ability, so I just kind of marked it there. Although I wouldn't even have that be my regular setting as kind of an everyday shooter. I probably wouldn't go any higher than 6400, but that's just me. You have your minimum shutter speed options. You have your long shutter noise reduction. You can have that on if you would like. It takes a little bit longer to be able to take another long exposure shot. Personally, I like to have that off if I'm doing any long exposure stuff. That way I can control it in Lightroom. Shading comp, you have your diffraction compensation. And these are general settings. You may use them, you may not. Stabilizer is all going to depend on the lens. This lens does not have a stabilizer in it, so naturally it's grayed out. Teleconverter or digital zoom, naturally we don't have that available with this lens. We have your burst rate, your 4K video options, your self-timer options, your time-lapse, silent mode. A lot of people think, this seems very tempting, they want to go full silent, but do keep in mind, if you do have your silent mode on, it can turn a lot of features that you may be using off. And then you don't know what happened, and then you think your camera's broken, but really it's just because you put it in silent mode, so do keep that in mind. You do have a shutter type option here, whether to go manual shutter, electric shutter, but it can limit you depending on the one that you choose, so do keep that in mind as well, like when it comes to long exposure photography. You have your shutter delay, you have bracketing, you have high dynamic range options, multiple exposure, or even doing like a timestamp recording if you do want it to have that. Now we're going to go ahead and head into the motion picture tab here. We're going to head up to tab page 1 here. So you have your record format. MP4 tends to be the most popular. Your record quality when it comes to 4K, HD, what frame rate you would like. You can do time code. Again, you can change your autofocus setting. I love to have the continuous autofocus on when the lens allows it, of course. You have your autofocus custom setting for your video if you would like to customize that. Again, photo style, so you can do like a monochromatic or something like that when it comes to your video if you want to shoot in a different way, like a different color setting. Filter settings, like if you want to do that one point select color, you can try that out. We have your metering mode for video, highlighting your shadows. Again, we're on through generally the same stuff that we went through in our recording menu. It's just going to be more so toward video. Again, you got your stabilizer. We have flicker decrease. If you happen to be shooting in a room with fluorescent lighting, those tend to flicker quite a bit, or incandescent, I believe it is. We have, teleconverter, digital zoom. A lot of these are just going to be exactly the same. You have your sound recording level display when it comes to using a mic. You can adjust that, do a test, see if it's coming out too loud. You can adjust the decibels inside the camera here. We have the level limiter, which is extremely helpful. You have your wind noise canceller. Lens noise cut, which is kind of a unique one to see. I absolutely love this option here, because one of the biggest complaints is you get a lens that's fantastic, but when it focuses, you can hear that roar, roar trying to focus, and that can be really distracting or even ruin a video. You have a special mic, your mic socket, sound output, HDMI record output. You've got a whole bunch of stuff in there to kind of go over. Then we have our custom settings menu here. These also have tabs, so we have like your exposure, your focus, your dials and buttons, your information, then your lens settings here. So starting at the top, a lot of these you may not change. They're there in case you do, but personally, you're going to find yourself in here in a very rare circumstance. That's why they have the quick menu for things that you're going to change on a regular basis. So you have like your ISO increments, extended ISO, your autofocus, auto exposure lock, which I did just realize I did not go over. So what this button does is when you have it pointed at something, like if you have it on spot metering and you want to lock in the lighting or the focus for that certain subject, you can lock it on there and then move your camera and recompose accordingly, which is really neat. So you can set that whether you want it to autofocus lock or auto exposure lock, depending on what you think you're going to utilize more. We have your shutter autofocus, half press release. I wouldn't recommend it. I get a lot of people frustrated with this feature where if you push halfway down on the shutter, it just takes it instead of focusing right away. Quick autofocus, eye sensor autofocus, pinpoint autofocus. You have your autofocus assist lamp, which is a little LED in the front of the camera. Shines out a light to help it focus if it's too low light. If there's not enough light available, or if there's not enough information like texture or something like that for it to grab onto. Focus and release priority, focus switching for vertical or horizontal. You have your loop movement, autofocus area display, if you want to see that, autofocus and manual focus working together, which I do like that option there. That's what really helped me do the video sample for this. Your manual focus assist, your assist display if you want it picture-in-picture, or if you want it taking up the whole screen. Function button set, so if you want to change any of these function buttons, this is where you would do it. If you want to change any of the functions of the buttons on the top of the camera there, your white balance, your ISO, exposure button, all those. Your quick menu, if you need to change any of that, your dials, your joystick setting, it's highly customizable, so you can do a lot of this stuff. Your touch settings, your auto review, so if you want the picture to pop up right after you take it, or if you don't want it to pop up at all. Monochrome live view. A lot of people like this option because it helps you see values better everywhere from highlights to shadows to see if how well they're going to come out. You have your constant preview, your live view boost, V-log view assist, which is pretty neat. You have your peaking, which I like having the focus peaking on. You have your histogram guidelines, video guidelines, center marker, highlights, zebra patterns. I personally find these distracting, but for a lot of people it is helpful, so it depends on your preference there. You have your expo meter, your manual focus guide, live viewfinder monitor display set, monitor info display, your record area, video priority display. I mean, like I said, a lot of these you're not going to change, or you may change them once when you first get the camera to what you prefer, and then you may leave it. So something to definitely consider. We have a lens function button setting, so some of the lenses have their own function button. We have face recognition or profile setup as well. Then we have our general setup tab here. So you have your online manual if you do need something that has more to it than what comes in the box, which chances are that's why you're watching this video, is the manual in the box did not give you enough information. Don't blame you there. That's the whole reason why I started making videos. You have your custom set when it comes to the custom mode options there, the C1 through C3. You have your clock set. Make sure that when you take the camera out of the box, that's something that you do firsthand, is you set the clock, you set the date, you set your location. You can also set a travel date if you are traveling with this camera, which is really neat. It does have Wi-Fi ability, so you can transfer photos specifically, not videos, at least not yet, through the Panasonic image application. It does have Bluetooth ability, power wireless indicator to let you know that it's feeding a wireless signal. You can turn on and off the beep when it comes to focus. Headphone volume if you're using headphones, economy mode. You have your monitor or viewfinder display speed. You have your night mode, monitor display, monitor luminance, your eye sensor here, USB mode, the TV connection if you would like to connect it to a TV. System frequency, the language, version display, which can be helpful when it comes to your firmware version, seeing if it needs an update. Keep an eye on that. You never know. With mirrorless cameras in general, firmware updates do happen more frequently than they did with DSLRs because naturally we have more of a computer in our hands now than mechanical parts. So keep an eye out for those. We have like different folders, file settings, your double slot function when it comes to your SD cards. We have your number reset if you would like to reset the number of pictures that you're on. So from 00001 if you want to start back there. Personally, I don't like that option, but you may find that helpful in your organizational tools when it comes to organizing it on hard drives. You can reset your settings. This is a lifesaver, especially if you're going through your menu, you start changing stuff, and all of a sudden your camera's doing something you don't want it to do. When all else fails and you don't know who to ask, just go on and reset your camera settings, and that way at least you're back to factory settings, and then you can set what you need. Reset network settings for Wi-Fi. You have pixel refresh, sensor cleaning. If you do, what it does is it kind of shakes the sensor a little bit, see if it can knock any dust off. But if you are seeing black spots on your image, you may need to take it to a professional to get the sensor cleaned. Level gauge adjust, and then we have format. Format I like to go over in every camera walkthrough because a lot of people don't know what format is, or maybe they found out the hard way. So formatting is going to take your SD card and it's going to permanently erase every piece of data on the card and give you a fresh card to start new with. And the reason you'd want to know what this is not only to avoid it in times where you have something important on the card and you haven't backed it up yet, but say you go and you record this video for a client. You've put it on your computer, you've edited it, you backed it up to your hard drive. Again, you make sure it's backed up to your hard drive, off the card, and you want to start over new. You have a new client, they want something new, but you want to reuse your card. What you can do is put in the camera and go format instead of doing the trash can. Because when you do the trash can, it essentially just recycles the visible image, but it still holds the data in the card. So when you just go through and you just delete and you never format, this can cause your card to lock up, it can cause corruption, it can cause some major issues down the line. So I definitely recommend every now and then, just go in, format your card, after you've made sure that your files are nice and safe on your computer or your hard drive. Then we have our My Menu tab, which allows you to take anything out of these tabs here that we've gone through, and you've probably seen somewhere like, I'm probably never going to change that. Why do I have to dig through that in order to get there? So what you can do is you can pick anything out of any of these tabs and you can set it to your My Menu setting. That way, if you do have to go into the menu and you don't want to assign something to your function buttons or your quick menu, you can just go to your My Menu tab and it's going to be right there for you. So again, highly customizable. And then our last one here is going to be our playback menu. So you can do a slideshow, you can adjust your playback mode, you can protect pictures, you can rate pictures, you can edit a title, do raw processing in camera, you can do 4K photo noise resolution, or noise reduction. You have light composition, you have retouching, text stamps, resizing, cropping, rotating, all these different things in camera. Now, personally, I don't like to edit on a 3-inch screen, but that's just me. For some people, they love the fact that they can edit in camera. But for me, I like to do things on my computer where I can see things much, much clearer. That kind of sums up the Panasonic GH5. If you're anything like me, I did find this camera a little intimidating. Honestly, this was one of them that I was sort of afraid to do a walkthrough of because I was like, I don't even know where to start. Like, I feel comfortable on other Panasonic cameras that do photography, but never once have I just gone and been like, oh, let me just try my hand at shooting a short film, to test out the video style of these guys. I've done short clips, but overall, I've never put together clips to do anything more than a vlog so far. So this was kind of a stretch for me, but overall, I did find it very easy to use once I started getting into it. This camera is not only easy to use and made me feel at ease using it, but it had a good grip, it felt comfortable in my hands. The only thing is I definitely would maybe get a different lens, maybe the 12mm. That is a top of the notch lens, even though it is expensive. Anywho, if you guys had any other questions about this camera that I did not cover, please let me know in the comments below if you would like to see other camera walkthroughs or examples or maybe a comparison or two. Also let me know in the comments below. And until next time, keep your eye out for inspiration, Shutterbugs. Bye.